Hello, everybody, and welcome to Ice-Burgh To Go, your daily dose of Pittsburgh Penguins news and analysis. You can find us on YouTube at Inside the Penguins or anywhere you get your podcasts from. To this point in the season, goaltending has been one of the Pittsburgh Penguins, if not their biggest strengths. I guess you could say Sidney Crosby in and of itself, his performance, not to mention Jake Guentzel's, is probably one of the biggest strengths of the Pittsburgh Penguins. But when you look at a position group entirely, goaltending has been the Pittsburgh Penguins' biggest strength to this point in the season. On January 1st, the Pens were fourth in the National Hockey League in goals against above expected. Tristan Jarry was riding a 12-game stretch where he had a 2.25 goals against average and a .922 save percentage to end 2023. Meanwhile, his backup, Alex Nedeljkovic, was 4-0-1 in his last 5 appearances with a .910 save percentage. It was a good duo. It was a great tandem. It was a tandem that we had been saying time and time again is probably the best we've seen in Pittsburgh since Tristan Jarry took over as the starting netminder. But since the turn of the new year, neither of them have looked particularly sturdy. It was only 2 games to this point, so again, take this with a grain of salt. They might turn it around as early as tomorrow when the Penguins take on the Buffalo Sabres at PPG Paints Arena. But to this point in 2024, 2 games in, against Washington on Tuesday, Tristan Jarry gives up 3 goals on 7 shots, and you might say the defense wasn't playing well. The Penguins as a whole were not playing well in that opening frame in which Tristan Jarry was pulled from, but Jarry gave up negative 2.78 goals allowed above expected, which means while yes, the defense wasn't there, yes, the offense wasn't there to start that game, he should have saved at least 2 of those first 3 goals he gave up to the Washington Capitals. And according to that statistic, he probably could have saved all 3. At the end of the day, some of that falls on the team in front of them. But Tristan Jarry, if you watch that game, was not good. He wasn't. He was shaky. He certainly seemed like he was off balance. Alex Nedeljkovic comes in relief. He looked okay in relief of Tristan Jarry. He gave up the 1 goal, and that goal wasn't on him. He couldn't see the puck because Ryan Graves was screening him, as I've mentioned a couple different times. So he gave up 1 goal on 15 shots. He did a good enough job to get the Pittsburgh Penguins back into the game. Now, he wasn't tested very much because the Washington Capitals, let's be honest, didn't have much juice after the first period. The Penguins outplayed them from the beginning of the second period on. They did get 15 shots on goal. A lot of them were perimeter shots. Not very many were follow-up shots, second, third, fourth opportunities. That's credited to the Penguins' defense, locking it down. That's also credited to the fact that the Washington Capitals played the picturesque, we're winning on the road, let's just dump the puck in deep and make sure that we get back so they don't get an opportunity. So, again, you can take it for what you will. Nedeljkovic looked fine on Tuesday. And then came last night. Alex Nedeljkovic gets the start. They say Tristan Jarry is going to sit because of his performance on Tuesday. Fine. Nedeljkovic has been good, as we mentioned, heading into the 2024 turn of the calendar. But he gives up 5 goals on 29 shots last night. The Penguins get the victory, which is the most important thing at the end of the day. But negative 2.66 goals saved above expected for Alex Nedeljkovic. Both he and Jarry were among the top 15 in the NHL in that statistical category throughout the majority of the season, and then both of them just have horrific performances to start 2024. Now, as I mentioned, it's only 2 games, so nothing to sound the alarms about yet. But the timing of these performances are very familiar, and that's the only reason I bring it up, and that's the only reason that this creeps into the back of my mind when I watched on Tuesday and when I watched yesterday. Jarry's track record pre- and post-New Year's speaks for itself. Pre-New Year's during the season, October to December, he's played 104 games in his career. He has a .567 win percentage, 59 wins, 30 regulation losses, and 13 losses in either overtime or a shootout. But he has a .924 save percentage, 2.24 goals against average, and 12 shutouts. That's between the months of October and December. post-New Year's, which has spanned from January to sometimes May in Tristan Jarry's career. He's played 23 more games, 127 to 104. He has a record of 69, 41, and 9, which is a .543 win percentage. But here's where things drop off. Save percentage goes from .924 before New Year's to .904 after New Year's. 20% drop in save percentage. His goals against average goes from 2.24 to 2.69. Again, large drop-off in goals against average. And his shutouts go from 12 to 5. In his career, he has had one shutout in each month of January, February, March, April, and May. 5 shutouts spanned out over each month throughout his career. So that track record is worrying. Now, the biggest difference was supposed to be you have Alex Nedeljkovic. You've changed it. Nedeljkovic was supposed to come in here, be the difference maker, and we've seen it at times this season. We saw it late in December where Nedeljkovic was the hot hand. They could trust him to go out and start 2, 3, maybe even 4 games in a row. Tristan Jarry ended up getting 11 days off. He came back in, and he got a shutout on Long Island against the New York Islanders in that 7-0 beating that the Penguins put onto them. So that was good. It's working. Will that continue throughout the season? That's what we now have to monitor. That's what we now have to keep an eye on, because there's relevance. There is relevance to the date of January 2nd in Tristan Jarry's career. January 2nd, 2023, Tristan Jarry leaves the Winter Classic in the first period with a hip injury. He ends up missing a substantial amount of time the remainder of the season with that injury, and even when he gets back into the lineup, he doesn't look like the player that he was in the beginning of the season, and he never gets back to the level that he was when the Pittsburgh Penguins were thriving and were, at that point, in the top 3 in the Metropolitan Division. This year, 2024, we're 5 days in, but we already have some bad deja vu. January 2nd, Tristan Jarry leaves in the first period of the game against the Washington Capitals, but the difference is he didn't leave due to injury, he was pulled. Something that has happened now twice in the past month. What happens next is anybody's guess. As everybody likes to say, goaltending is voodoo. Maybe this is just a coincidence, and maybe Tristan Jarry goes on to have his best post-New Year's season of his career, which would certainly be a welcomed sign for the Pittsburgh Penguins. But as we stand right now, the Pittsburgh Penguins cannot afford a repeat of history this season. They can't afford Tristan Jarry following the story of his career to this point. They are too reliant on the performance of both of their goaltenders for that to happen. The difference was supposed to be Nedeljkovic, like I mentioned. He looked rough last night. After the first 10 minutes of play, after the David Pastrnak goal, I texted a lot of people during the game and I said, I don't trust Ned tonight. Now, I've trusted Ned most of this season when I've watched him play, but you could tell there was something off last night. Is that a one-off, or does that end up being more so who he is the rest of the season? That answer could be a big part in whether or not the Pittsburgh Penguins can complete this climb back into the playoffs that they have been attempting over the last month. And they're very close to it. They're very close to it. They're 4 points shy of, I believe, second place in the Metropolitan Division, yet they still sit outside of a playoff spot. That's how close the Eastern Conference is. And if you want to get over the hump, if you want to get back into the postseason, you need your goaltenders to play as stellar as they have played to this point this season. So, while I will say, don't start planning the fire sale after 2 games. Don't start saying, all right, that's fine, then let's sell Jake Gensel, let's sell Rickard Rakell to somebody that's not on his 8-team no-trade list. Let's sell. Before you start planning the fire sale, let's hold off. Let it at least get to the point that Kyle Dubas publicly mentioned, which was the All-Star game, and let's see a little bit more than a 2-game sample size on 2024. But I'm not going to lie to you guys. It's in the back of my mind. The seed has been planted over years from Tristan Jarry, and while Alex Nedeljkovic is new to the Pittsburgh Penguins, his 2-year struggle in Detroit still looms over his career. Goaltending is voodoo, but goaltending so far has been kind to the Pittsburgh Penguins in the 2023-24 season. hopefully 2024 gets back to where we were in 2023. It's definitely something to monitor as the Pens look to climb their way back into the Eastern Conference playoff picture. That's going to do it for this episode of Ice-Burgh To Go. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. And remember, you can find us on YouTube at Inside the Penguins or anywhere you get your podcast from.